Sometimes the hardest thing in the world is watching someone you love destroy themselves while trying to earn love from people who will never give it to them. And that's exactly what happened with me and Sarah, my former fiancée, the woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with, until her toxic family tore everything apart, piece by piece, day by day, until there was nothing left but heartbreak and regret. And even now, months later, I still wonder if there was something more I could have done. Something I could have said differently that might have saved her from the terrible fate that awaited her. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning because to truly understand this story, you need to know how Sarah and I met and how deeply I loved her before everything fell apart. I first met Sarah at a coffee shop in Denver, Colorado, on a rainy Tuesday morning in October 4 years ago. And I still remember every detail of that day, the way her auburn hair fell across her face as she bent over her laptop typing furiously, the way she bit her lower lip when she was concentrating, the way she looked up and caught me staring, and instead of looking away, she smiled this brilliant, radiant smile that made my heart skip a beat. I was 28 at the time, working as a software developer for a tech startup, and she was 26 finishing her MBA while working full-time as a marketing manager at a nonprofit. And from the moment we started talking, I knew there was something special about her, something that went beyond her obvious intelligence and beauty. There was a vulnerability in her eyes, a sadness that she tried to hide behind her smile and jokes, but I could see it lurking there like a shadow. And maybe that's what drew me to her initially, that sense that she needed someone to truly see her, to understand her, to love her the way she deserved to be loved. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant downtown, and we talked for hours about everything and nothing. Our dreams, our fears, our favorite books and movies, and somewhere between the appetizer and dessert, I found myself falling for her hard and fast, in a way I'd never experienced before. She told me about growing up in a small town in Kansas, how she'd always felt like the odd one out in her family, how her parents favored her two older brothers, Michael and James, while she was expected to be perfect and never complain, to always put everyone else's needs before her own. She laughed when she told me these stories, but there was pain behind the laughter, a deep wound that had never properly healed. And I remember reaching across the table to take her hand and promising myself that I would do everything in my power to make her happy, to show her what real love looked like. For the first year, everything was perfect. We moved in together after 6 months into a cozy 2-bedroom apartment in the suburbs and created a life together filled with Sunday morning pancakes and Netflix marathons and inside jokes that only we understood. Sarah flourished in our relationship, becoming more confident, more assured, more willing to pursue her dreams. She got promoted at work, started painting again, something she'd given up years ago, and even began seeing a therapist to work through some of her childhood trauma. I was so proud of her, so in love with this brilliant, beautiful woman who chose to share her life with me, and I started saving for an engagement ring, knowing without a doubt that she was the one I wanted to marry. But everything changed when Sarah's mother called one night about 18 months into our relationship, crying and saying she needed help, that Sarah's father had lost his job and they were about to lose their house, and could Sarah please just lend them some money just this once, just to get them through this rough patch. And of course Sarah said yes, because despite everything they'd put her through, she still loved them, still wanted their approval, still hoped that maybe this time things would be different. I remember the way her hands shook as she transferred $5,000 from her savings account, the way she kept saying it would be fine, that they'd pay her back. That family helps family. And I held her that night as she cried herself to sleep. And I should have known then, I should have seen the warning signs, but I was blinded by love and hope, and the naive belief that everything would work out. The loan was never repaid, of course, and soon her parents were calling more frequently, always with new crises, new emergencies, new reasons why they desperately needed money. Her father's back problems, her mother's car breaking down, her brother Michael's gambling debts, her brother James's failed business venture, and Sarah gave and gave and gave, depleting her savings, her retirement fund, even taking out loans to help them, because she couldn't say no, couldn't bear the thought of disappointing them or being called selfish, which is what they called her, whenever she hesitated, whenever she suggested that maybe they should find other solutions to their problems. They would guilt her, manipulate her, remind her of all the sacrifices they'd made raising her. Even though from what Sarah had told me, the only sacrifices they'd made were in her direction, forcing her to give up opportunities, so her brothers could have them making her work from age 14 to contribute to the household while her brothers played sports and hung out with friends. I tried to talk to her about it many times, sitting her down at our kitchen table with cups of tea and trying to explain that what her family was doing wasn't normal, wasn't healthy, wasn't love. But she would get defensive, tell me I didn't understand their dynamic, that I'd grown up in a stable, loving family, with parents who actually cared about my well-being, so how could I possibly understand what it was like to desperately want love from people who seemed incapable of giving it? And she was right in a way I couldn't fully understand because my parents had always been supportive, encouraging, proud of my accomplishments, and respectful of my boundaries. They'd never asked me for money, never guilt-tripped me, never made me feel like I had to earn their love through sacrifice and suffering. Things got progressively worse after we got engaged. Sarah was so happy that night when I proposed at our favorite hiking spot overlooking the city, the ring sparkling in the sunset, as tears of joy streamed down her face. And for a brief moment, I thought maybe this would be the turning point. Maybe now that we were building our own family, she would be able to set boundaries with her birth family. But I was wrong. So terribly wrong, because her family saw our engagement not as a celebration, but as an opportunity. They started showing up at our apartment, unannounced, expecting to be fed and entertained, treating our home like their personal hotel. And Sarah couldn't say no. Just let them in with this defeated look in her eyes, while they made themselves comfortable criticizing our decor, eating our food, leaving messes for us to clean up. Her mother would walk around our apartment like she owned it, opening drawers, rearranging furniture, making snide comments about how Sarah could afford such a nice place when her own family was struggling. And the subtext was always clear. Sarah was selfish for having anything nice when her family was in need. Her father would raid our refrigerator and pantry, taking food without asking, leaving dirty dishes piled in the sink. And when I tried to say something, Sarah would beg me with her eyes to just let it go, to not make waves, to keep the peace, even though there was no peace, to keep just this constant state of tension and dread whenever we heard a knock at the door. Michael and James were even worse, treating our apartment like a frat house, bringing their friends over without asking, playing loud music, breaking things, and then laughing it off like it was no big deal. And through it all, Sarah would stand in the corner of our living room, arms wrapped around herself, trembling like a scared child, while her family ignored her, unless they needed something from her money, a place to crash, someone to yell at when their lives weren't going well. And I watched the woman I loved shrink smaller and smaller, trying to make herself invisible, trying to avoid their criticism, their demands, their endless, bottomless need for more. More money, more attention, more sacrifice, more of her soul, until there was barely anything left. I remember one particularly horrible Saturday when her entire family showed up for what they called a family meeting, but was really just an ambush to demand that Sarah co-sign a loan for Michael, who wanted to start another business. Despite having failed at 3 previous ventures, they sat in our living room like a tribunal with Sarah in the hot seat, while they berated her for being hesitant, told her she was ungrateful, selfish, a terrible sister and daughter. And I watched my fiancée cry silently, tears rolling down her cheeks as she apologized over and over for not immediately agreeing to potentially destroy her credit for her brother, who had never shown her an ounce of kindness or respect. And that's when I knew something had to change, that we couldn't go on like this, that this toxic dynamic was going to destroy not just our relationship, but Sarah herself. So I made the decision to talk to Sarah about postponing our wedding. I spent days planning what I would say, how I would approach it, because I knew it would be difficult, knew she would be hurt. But I also knew that marrying into this situation without boundaries, without change, would be a disaster. I couldn't imagine bringing children into this toxic environment, couldn't imagine spending the rest of my life watching the woman I loved be abused and manipulated by people who claimed to love her, but showed nothing but cruelty and exploitation. The conversation happened on a Thursday evening after Sarah came home from work early, looking exhausted and defeated, as she'd been looking more and more often lately. I'd taken the day off to prepare both the meal, her favorite pasta dish, and mentally for what I knew would be a difficult discussion. We sat at our dining room table, the same table where we'd shared so many happy meals and conversations. But this time the atmosphere was heavy with tension and unspoken fears. I started gently telling her how much I loved her, how I wanted nothing more than to marry her and build a life together, but that I was concerned about the current situation with her family. As I spoke, I watched her expression change from confusion to understanding to anger, her face flushing red as she realized what I was saying. I explained that I didn't feel comfortable proceeding with our wedding plans, while her family had such unlimited access to our lives that I needed to know we could have boundaries, that our future children wouldn't be exposed to this toxicity, that we could have a home that truly felt like ours. Not like a halfway house for her relatives. I suggested couples therapy before the wedding, asked if she would consider limiting her family's visits and financial demands, tried to make her understand that this wasn't about controlling her, but about protecting us, protecting our future, protecting her from continuing to be drained emotionally and financially by people who gave nothing back. But Sarah didn't hear it that way. All she heard was criticism, judgment, an ultimatum from someone else who claimed to love her, but was really just trying to control her, like her family did. She started yelling something she rarely did, accusing me of not understanding their dynamic of being privileged and judgmental of trying to isolate her from her family. She said the arrangement worked for her, that she was fine with it, that I was the one with the problem, and I found myself yelling back, something I'm not proud of. But I was so frustrated, so tired of watching her suffer while pretending everything was fine. I told her that her family was abusive, that they were users who would bleed her dry and had never shown her any genuine love or respect. The words hung in the air between us like a physical barrier, and I could see the moment something broke inside her. She told me that she just needed to work harder to earn their love, their respect, their approval, and that's when I lost it. Completely told her that a parent's love shouldn't have to be earned, that children shouldn't have to beg and plead and sacrifice everything, just to get a crumb of affection from the people who brought them into the world. But she couldn't hear it, couldn't see it, because the little girl inside her, who just wanted her mommy and daddy to love her, was still in control, still desperate, still willing to destroy herself for the possibility that maybe this time, maybe if she gave just a little more, they would finally see her value. I gave her an ultimatum that night, something I'd sworn I'd never do in a relationship, but I was desperate and scared and could see our future crumbling before my eyes. I told her she had to set boundaries with her family, or I would leave. And looking back, I know I handled it badly. Know I should have been more patient, more understanding, but I was drowning too, watching the woman I loved destroy herself, and our relationship for people who didn't deserve her sacrifice. And when she told me to get out of her house, not our house, but her house, because she'd been paying the mortgage, I knew it was over. Knew that she had chosen them over us, over our future, over herself. The next few days were surreal. I stayed in a hotel downtown, staring at the ceiling and wondering how everything had fallen apart so quickly. I'd had our whole life planned out: the wedding, the kids, the house with the white picket fence, the growing old together, and now I was alone in a sterile hotel room with my belongings in storage and my heart in pieces. But underneath the pain and grief, there was also relief. Terrible, guilty relief, that I didn't have to watch her family tear through our apartment anymore, didn't have to bite my tongue while they insulted and degraded her, didn't have to pretend that any of this was normal or acceptable. I spent those days in the hotel doing things I hadn't done in months, playing video games, reading books, going for long walks without worrying about what crisis would be waiting when I got home. It was peaceful in a way that made me realize just how much stress I'd been under, how much their chaos had infected our life together. But I couldn't fully enjoy it, because I kept thinking about Sarah alone in that apartment with no buffer between her and her family's demands. No one to hold her when she cried herself to sleep after another one of their emotional attacks. Saturday came and I knew what would happen. Her family always came over on Saturday afternoons to raid the refrigerator, demand money, and generally make her life miserable. And she always called me to help run interference, to be her shield, to absorb some of their negativity so she didn't have to bear it all alone. But this Saturday, I didn't answer my phone. I muted it, put it in the drawer, and spent the day at a museum, then at a movie, then at a nice restaurant, eating a quiet dinner alone. And I know it was petty, know it was cruel, but I was so angry, so hurt, so tired of being used as an emotional buffer that I just couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't pretend to care about her problems when she'd chosen those problems over our relationship. By the evening, she'd called 17 times and sent dozens of increasingly frantic texts begging me to come help her to please just answer the phone to come home. And finally, around 10 p.m., she left 2 voicemails, and I could hear in her voice that something had broken. She was sobbing so hard she could barely speak, begging me to come back, saying she needed me, that she couldn't do this alone anymore, that they'd said things, horrible things, and she didn't know what to do. And despite everything, despite my anger and hurt, I still loved her. So I went. I found her curled up on our living room floor, still in the same clothes from that morning, her face swollen from crying, her whole body shaking with exhaustion and grief. The apartment was a disaster. Furniture, moved dishes, broken picture frames smashed, and she just looked so small, so defeated, so utterly broken, that all my anger evaporated, replaced by concern and sorrow. I sat down next to her, and she immediately threw herself into my arms, sobbing so hard I was afraid she'd make herself sick, clinging to me like I was a life raft in a storm, which I suppose I had been for years. When she finally calmed down enough to speak, the story came out in broken pieces. Her family had come over as usual. But without me, there to deflect, they'd focused all their negativity on her. They demanded more money than ever before, wanted her to take out a second mortgage on the apartment to fund another one of Michael's schemes, and when she'd tried to say she needed to think about it, they'd turned vicious. Her mother called her ungrateful, and Selfish said she'd always been a disappointment, that they'd wasted so much raising her, only for her to turn her back on them when they needed her most. Her father said she was just like all women, gold-digging and heartless, keeping money for herself while her family suffered. Her brothers told her I'd left because I could see what a pathetic loser she was, that no one would ever really love her because she was fundamentally unlovable. They'd stayed for hours, tag-teaming their abuse, taking turns breaking her down until she'd finally snapped and told them to leave, but not before they'd destroyed things, broken her grandmother's vase, the one precious thing she had from the only family member who'd ever shown her real love, knocked over picture frames of us, thrown dishes and all, while telling her this was what she deserved for being such a terrible daughter and sister. And as she told me this story, I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest, a realization that this was never going to get better, that she was never going to be free of them unless something drastic changed. I held her while she cried herself out, then helped her clean up the apartment in silence, both of us lost in our own thoughts. And when we finally sat down on the couch, exhausted and emotionally drained, I laid out my conditions for moving forward, and I made them harsh, made them non-negotiable, because I knew anything less wouldn't work, wouldn't save her or us from this toxic cycle. First, she had to sell the apartment, and we would buy a new place together, somewhere her family didn't have the address, a fresh start where we were equal partners, where it was our home, not hers, where I had just as much say in who came through the door. Second, her family was never allowed in our new home. Never, not for holidays, not for emergencies, not for any reason. If she wanted to see them, it would be in public places where they couldn't trap her, couldn't surround her, couldn't destroy our belongings. Third, she had to find a new therapist because clearly the current one wasn't helping her see how abusive this situation was, and we needed to start couples counseling immediately to work through the damage this had caused to our relationship. Fourth, I would have no contact with her family, would not attend any family functions, would not be her shield anymore, because that dynamic was unhealthy for both of us. And fifth, we would start with low contact with her family, working toward no contact, because I could see that cutting them off cold turkey would be too much for her, but the end goal had to be freedom from their toxicity. I watched her face as I laid out each condition, saw the war between the part of her that knew I was right and the part that was still that scared little girl, desperate for her parents' love. She asked me questions in a small voice. What if there was a real emergency? What if they changed? What if they needed her? And I had to be firm, had to make her understand that there would always be emergencies, that they would never change, that their need for her was not the same as love. That need was about what she could do for them, not who she was as a person. Finally, she agreed, said she'd known for a while that her family was toxic but hadn't been able to admit it to herself. Said that when she'd tried to call me for help and I wasn't there, she'd realized how isolated she'd become, how she'd pushed away all her friends because she was embarrassed by her family, or because she'd used them as shields too, until they got tired of it and distanced themselves. She said she wanted to change, wanted to be free, wanted to have the life we'd dreamed of together. And I believed her, wanted to believe her, needed to believe her, because the alternative was too painful to contemplate. We spent Sunday together in the hotel room, ordering room service, watching movies, talking about our future, with a tentative hope that maybe we could salvage this. Maybe we could build something better from the wreckage, and she seemed different, lighter, like admitting the truth about her family had lifted a weight from her shoulders. She made jokes again, laughed at silly things in the movies, reached for my hand with a shy smile like we were new lovers again. And I let myself hope, let myself believe that we'd turned a corner, that everything would be okay. Monday and Tuesday were good days too. We looked at apartments online, talked about neighborhoods and floor plans and how we'd decorate our new place. She went to work with a spring in her step, came home with stories about her day, instead of the usual exhausted silence. She even made an appointment with a new therapist, someone who specialized in family trauma and toxic relationships. But Wednesday evening, everything changed. She was supposed to come to the hotel after work so we could go to dinner at a new restaurant that had opened downtown, but she was late. Very late. And when she finally showed up, I could see something was wrong. She looked nervous, guilty, unable to meet my eyes, and I knew before she even opened her mouth that her family had gotten to her again. She launched into a speech about how I was being controlling and abusive, how I was trying to isolate her from her family, how I was demanding and unsupportive, and the words were so clearly not hers, so obviously scripted that it would have been laughable if it wasn't so tragic. I asked her point blank if her family had told her to say this, and she tried to deny it at first. But when I pushed, she admitted they'd suggested. She talked to me about my behavior, said she'd come up with the specific words herself, but I could hear their voice in every accusation, every twisted interpretation of my attempts to protect her, protect us. They'd called me a parasite, which was rich. Considering I'd been paying half of everything, while they drained her dry, they'd said I was isolating her when they were the ones who'd driven away all her friends with their toxic behavior. They'd convinced her that my boundaries were about control rather than survival, and she'd believed them, chosen to believe them, because it was easier than facing the truth about who they really were. I was done. I was so completely done that I couldn't even be angry anymore. Just tired and sad and resigned to the fact that she was determined to destroy herself for these people who didn't deserve her sacrifice. I told her to leave the hotel room, told her I needed space to think about what to do next. But I already knew it was over. Knew that she would never choose herself over them, never choose our love over their manipulation, never be free of the hold they had on her. And the saddest part was that I understood why. Understood that when you've been conditioned from birth to believe that love means sacrifice, that worth is determined by what you can give, rather than who you are, it's almost impossible to break free. The next few days were a blur of her friends reaching out to me concerned about her behavior. Apparently she'd been ranting to them too, giving them similar speeches about how controlling I was, how they didn't understand her family dynamic, how she was fine and didn't need help. And they were worried because they could see her spiraling, could see her pushing everyone away, just like I'd warned would happen. Some of them had tried to maintain friendships despite her family's interference, but now she was actively driving them away, accusing them of not being supportive, of judging her, of trying to control her, just like she'd accused me. One friend, Maria, told me that Sarah might be at risk of losing her job, that she'd been calling in sick, missing important meetings, showing up late and disheveled when she did come in, that her boss had pulled her aside to express concern and suggest she take some time off to deal with whatever was going on in her personal life. But Sarah had gotten defensive, told him she was fine, that everyone needed to stop treating her like she was broken, when she was just trying to live her life. And Maria was worried that Sarah was having some kind of breakdown, that the stress of everything was causing her to self-destruct. I knew I should care, should do something to help, but I was empty, had nothing left to give, had spent 3 years trying to save someone who didn't want to be saved. And now I just needed to save myself. I was scheduled to fly home to Seattle to stay with my parents for a few weeks to clear my head and figure out my next steps, and part of me wanted to delay to stay and try one more time, but I knew it would be pointless, knew that Sarah had made her choice, and I had to respect it even if it was killing me to watch. But I did need to get a few final things from the apartment, important documents, a few sentimental items that I'd left behind in my hasty exit, so I arranged to go by when I knew she'd be at work, or at least when she should have been at work. Brought my friend Tom with me for moral support and potential witness in case things went south. But she was there looking like she hadn't slept in days, wearing the same clothes I'd last seen her in, her hair unwashed, her face gaunt and hollow-eyed. The apartment was a disaster worse than I'd ever seen it, with dishes piled everywhere, garbage overflowing, empty wine bottles scattered around, and she started in on me the moment I walked through the door, telling me how happy she was now that I was gone, how she was already seeing someone else, how much better her life was without me in it. And the words were venomous, cruel, designed to hurt, but delivered in such an exhausted monotone that they lost their power. She couldn't even muster the energy to properly hate me, just stood there reciting her family's script like a broken robot. I ignored her as best I could, gathering my things, while Tom stood awkwardly by the door, trying not to stare at the destruction around us, at this woman who'd once been so vibrant, so full of life, now reduced to a hollow shell spewing poison. She didn't even believe. But as I was leaving, I couldn't help myself, had to say something, had to try one last time to reach whatever was left of the woman I'd loved. I told her, "Congratulations. Your friends are gone. Your support system is gone, your engagement is over. Anyone who ever treated you with genuine love and respect is gone. It's just you and your family now. Just you and the people who've spent your whole life tearing you down, taking everything you have to give and demanding more. I hope you're happy while they bleed you dry. And she just stood there staring at me with empty eyes. No flicker of emotion, no sign that my words had penetrated the wall she'd built around herself. And then she turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the doorway of what had once been our home, our sanctuary, our happy place. Tom drove me to the airport in silence, occasionally glancing at me with concern, but understanding that there were no words that could make this better, that sometimes love isn't enough, that you can't save someone who's determined to drown. And as the plane took off, carrying me away from Denver, away from Sarah, away from the life I'd thought we'd build together, I let myself cry for the first time. Really cry for everything we'd lost, for the future that would never be for the woman I'd loved, who'd chosen destruction over happiness, chosen the familiar pain of her family's abuse over the unfamiliar territory of healthy love. Being home with my parents was exactly what I needed. The unconditional love, the stability, the reminder of what family was supposed to look like. My mother made my favorite foods without being asked. My father took me fishing. Didn't push me to talk. Just let me sit in comfortable silence while we waited for the fish to bite. My sister flew in from Portland to spend a weekend just hanging out, watching movies, eating too much ice cream, reminding me that I was loved, that I had value beyond what I could do for others, that healthy relationships existed and were worth holding out for. I started therapy myself, needing to process not just the breakup, but the years of secondhand trauma of watching someone I loved be systematically destroyed by the people who should have protected her. My therapist helped me understand that I'd developed my own codependent patterns, trying to save Sarah from her family, that I'd enabled the situation by being her shield, instead of insisting she develop her own boundaries, that my love, however genuine, couldn't heal wounds that she wasn't ready to acknowledge existed. A couple of weeks into my stay, the mutual friends started reaching out with updates I hadn't asked for. Updates didn't want to know, but they were worried, and I suppose they thought I might be able to do something, though. What I could do from across the country when I couldn't help. While I was there, I didn't know the news wasn't good. Sarah was spiraling hard. She'd been having manic episodes at work, crying jags, followed by inappropriate laughter, making grandiose statements about new business ventures. She was going to start with her brothers. She'd been put on administrative leave pending a psychological evaluation, but instead of seeing it as a wake-up call, she'd interpreted it as validation, that everyone was against her, just like her family said. She'd tried to call me multiple times, but I'd blocked her number, knowing that hearing her voice would weaken my resolve, make me want to fly back and try again. Even though I knew it would be futile, one of her friends forwarded me a voicemail she'd left for them, begging them to ask me to unblock her, saying she'd made a terrible mistake, that she needed me, that she was drowning and didn't know how to stop. But even in her desperation, she couldn't admit the truth about her family, couldn't say the words that might have changed everything, couldn't acknowledge that they were the problem, not everyone else in her life who'd tried to help her. The intervention was planned for a Sunday. 3 weeks after I'd left, her friends had coordinated with her one sympathetic cousin and even her boss, who, despite everything, valued her enough to want to see her get help. They were going to confront her together, try to break through the walls she'd built, try to make her see that she was destroying herself. But Saturday night, before they could execute their plan, everything went to hell. Her family had visited again, and something had finally snapped inside her. Maybe it was the accumulated stress. Maybe it was finally being alone with them without any buffers. Maybe it was the realization that this was her life now. Just her and them and their endless demands. But whatever it was, she'd had a complete breakdown, calling friends, screaming incoherently about being trapped, about not being able to breathe, about needing to get out, get away, make it stop. And someone had called 911 and she'd been taken to the emergency room in the middle of a full-blown panic attack. The hospital kept her for 72 hours suicide watch, they called it. Though her friends insisted she hadn't been suicidal, just completely overwhelmed, broken down by months of accumulated trauma and stress. But being hospitalized forced her to stop, to be still, to exist without her family's constant presence and manipulation. And apparently in that stillness, something had finally clicked. She'd called one of her friends from the hospital crying, but coherent, saying she understood now that her family was killing her, that she'd destroyed everything good in her life, trying to earn love from people who were incapable of giving it, that she needed help, real help, to break free from them. Her friends rallied around her again, Because that's what good people do, even when you've pushed them away. Even when you've said terrible things in your pain and confusion. They helped her find an intensive outpatient program for trauma and codependency, helped her file a restraining order when her family tried to visit her in the hospital, against medical advice, helped her change her locks and phone number when she got out, and for a brief moment it seemed like maybe she'd hit rock bottom and was ready to climb back up. Her boss gave her another chance, told her to take all the time she needed to get healthy, that her job would be waiting when she was ready to come back. Her friends took turns staying with her, making sure she wasn't alone during the hardest first days of no contact with her family, and she seemed to be doing better going to therapy, attending support groups, reading books about toxic families and boundary setting, even reaching out to apologize to people she'd hurt during her spiral. One of our mutual friends passed along a message from her, a long apology acknowledging that everything I'd said about her family was true, that she'd known it even then, but couldn't face it, that the horrible things she'd said to me were their words, not hers, that she was sorry for choosing them over us, over herself, that she understood why I'd had to leave and didn't blame me for protecting myself. She said she still loved me, would always love me, but understood that she destroyed any chance we had and just wanted me to know that I'd been right, that she should have listened, that she was trying to do better now. I sent back a brief message through the friend saying I appreciated her apology, that I was glad she was getting help, that I wished her healing and peace, but that we needed to stay separated for both our sakes, that too much damage had been done, and we both needed to focus on our own healing without the complication of trying to repair what was irreparably broken. It was one of the hardest things I've ever written, but I knew it was necessary, knew that going back would only restart the cycle, and neither of us could survive another round. For a while it seemed like she was really making progress. Her friends reported that she was attending therapy, religiously going to codependency. Support groups had even started reaching out to other family scapegoats online, finding community with people who understood what she'd been through. She was painting again, had redecorated the apartment to make it feel like hers, rather than a space constantly invaded by others, was even talking about maybe going back to school for art therapy, wanting to help other people who'd experienced family trauma. Her family, of course, didn't go quietly. They launched a full-scale campaign to get her back first, with love bombing, sending flowers and cards and messages about how much they missed her, how sorry they were, how they just wanted their family to be whole again. When that didn't work, they switched to guilt, talking about how her father's health was failing, how her mother was depressed, how her brothers needed their sister. And when that didn't work, they went nuclear, posting on social media about their ungrateful daughter who'd abandoned them after everything they'd done for her, trying to turn extended family and family friends against her. But something had shifted in Sarah. She didn't cave, didn't break, didn't run back to them begging for forgiveness. Instead, she documented everything for her restraining order. Case stayed strong with the help of her support system, and slowly, painfully began to build a life free from their influence. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, days when she'd call friends crying, saying she felt like a terrible person for abandoning her family. Days when the guilt felt like it would swallow her whole, but she kept going, kept fighting, kept choosing herself for the first time in her life. I was genuinely happy for her, relieved that she'd finally found the strength to break free, even if it had come too late for us. I threw myself into my own healing, and growth started, dating again, tentatively at first, then with more confidence, as I remembered what it felt like to be with someone who didn't need saving, who came to the relationship whole and healthy, who had boundaries with their family and friends, who could give and receive love without the constant shadow of dysfunction hanging over everything. I thought that was the end of the story. Thought we'd both moved on to better lives separately, but still better. And in a way, I was right. But not in the way I expected, because 2 months after Sarah had started her recovery journey, everything came crashing down in the most horrific way possible. And even now, months later, I still struggle to process what happened. Struggle to understand how someone who'd finally found freedom could lose it so completely. It started with a betrayal that no one saw coming, apparently, during those 3 years I'd been with Sarah, watching her family tear her apart, trying to shield her from their worst behavior. She'd been having an affair with Daniel, her best friend Tiffany's boyfriend, the same Tiffany who'd been one of her strongest supporters during her recovery, who'd spent nights holding her while she cried about her family, who'd risked their friendship multiple times, trying to help Sarah see how toxic her situation was. And Sarah had been sleeping with her boyfriend behind her back for 8 months. 8 months of lying and sneaking and betraying one of the only people who truly loved her. The truth came out when Tiffany grew suspicious of how touchy-feely Sarah and Daniel had become during group hangouts, how they always seemed to end up sitting next to each other, how Daniel would volunteer to check on Sarah alone, how Sarah would text him late at night about her problems instead of reaching out to her female friends. Tiffany's intuition told her something was wrong, and one night while Daniel was sleeping, she went through his phone and found everything: months of explicit messages, photos, evidence of encounters in Sarah's apartment while I was at work, while Tiffany thought her boyfriend was at the gym, while everyone who cared about Sarah was trying to help her. She'd been betraying us all. The fallout was catastrophic. Tiffany confronted both of them separately, and Daniel, in what I can only assume was panic or spite, decided to throw another friend under the bus, claiming that Joseph had known about the affair, had helped cover for them, had even served as an alibi on multiple occasions. Joseph's girlfriend kicked him out immediately. The friend group that had rallied around Sarah exploded into accusations and recriminations, years of friendship destroyed in an instant, and at the center of it all was Sarah facing the consequences of her actions without her usual shields and buffers to protect her. When confronted about why she'd done it, why she'd betrayed her best friend, why she'd destroyed the support system she desperately needed, Sarah gave the most pathetic explanation. She said Daniel had been supportive during her troubles with her family, that they'd grown close, that one thing had led to another, that she'd wanted to end it, but he wouldn't leave Tiffany, and she'd convinced herself that as long as no one knew, no one would get hurt. But the real revelation came when she admitted that she'd told her family about Daniel, and they'd approved of him, liked him better than me, thought he was more suitable, more malleable, more willing to put up with their behavior, and she'd actually considered leaving me for him, except he wouldn't commit to her beyond their secret meetings. So, while I'd been killing myself trying to save her from her family, while I'd been absorbing their abuse and hatred, while I'd been begging her to choose our life together, she'd been planning an exit strategy with someone else, someone her family approved of, someone who apparently didn't challenge their toxic dynamic, didn't insist on boundaries, didn't try to protect her from them. The betrayal was so complete, so devastating, that even now I can barely wrap my mind around it. The woman I'd loved, the woman I'd tried to save, had been deceiving me in the most fundamental way possible. Everyone abandoned her after that. Even the friends who'd been willing to forgive her family issues couldn't forgive. This couldn't understand how she could destroy the people who'd loved her most, and Sarah was left completely alone for the first time in her life. No boyfriend, no friends, no support system, just her and the family. She'd tried so hard to escape, and of course they welcomed her back with open arms, told her they'd known her friends were no good, told her they were the only ones who truly loved her, the only ones she could count on, and without anyone else to reality check their manipulation. Sarah fell right back into old patterns. She lost her job permanently. This time couldn't maintain the facade of normalcy. Without support, couldn't function in a professional environment, while drowning in family dysfunction, moved back to the apartment that had once been ours, and spent her days with her family, letting them drain what little was left of her spirit, her savings, her will to live, and everyone who'd tried to help her could only watch from a distance as she destroyed herself, because there was nothing left to do. Nothing left to try. She'd burned every bridge, rejected every lifeline, chosen her dysfunction over health every single time. 2 weeks ago, on a particularly cold Tuesday night, Sarah took her own life. She was alone in the apartment when she did it, but her family had been there earlier that day, demanding money. She didn't have making her feel worthless and unlovable like they always did. But this time, there was no one to call. No friend to comfort her. No fiancé to come home to just her, and the voices in her head telling her she was a failure, a disappointment, a waste of space. All the things her family had been telling her for years that she'd finally started to believe were true. Her parents found her, or rather they let themselves into the apartment with the spare key they'd demanded she give them, and found her. But according to the neighbor who witnessed their arrival, they seemed more annoyed than grieved. Complained about the mess and the inconvenience, talked about how she'd always been dramatic, always making everything about herself, even in death. They couldn't muster basic human compassion for their daughter, couldn't pretend to care about the life that had been lost, only the inconvenience it caused them. There were notes she'd left, several of them, one for each friend she'd betrayed, one for me, one for her family. Though what she could have had left to say to them, I can't imagine Tiffany called me that night. Her own grief and complicated feelings aside, she thought I should know, thought I might want closure, Might want to read what Sarah had written in her final moments, but I don't. I can't. Because what could she possibly say that would make any of this make sense? What words could explain how someone could have so many chances at happiness and reject them all? What apology could undo years of deception and self-destruction? I've thought a lot about Sarah's story since then, tried to understand how someone who had everything going for her intelligence beauty career, people who loved her, could end up so broken, so lost. And I keep coming back to that scared little girl who just wanted her parents to love her, who learned that love meant pain, that worth was measured in sacrifice, that boundaries were selfishness and saying no was betrayal. She never had a chance, really never learned what healthy love looked like until it was too late. And even then she couldn't accept it, couldn't believe she deserved it, couldn't stop chasing the approval of people who were incapable of giving it. I'm in therapy myself now, working through the complicated grief of losing someone twice, first to their dysfunction, and then to death, working through the anger at her for choosing destruction over love, the guilt over whether I could have done something differently, the sorrow for the life we could have had if things had been different. And my therapist tells me it's normal to feel all of these things at once, that grief is complicated when the person you're mourning hurt you, that it's okay to be angry at the dead, that loving someone doesn't mean you have to forgive everything they did. I've learned a lot about myself through this process, about my own patterns and tendencies, how I'm drawn to people who need saving, how I mistake intensity for love, how I enable dysfunction by trying to be the hero, and I'm working on it, dating differently now, looking for partners who are whole and healthy, who have good relationships with their families, or have done the work to heal from bad ones, who can set boundaries and respect mine, who don't need me to save them, because they've already saved themselves. Sometimes late at night when I can't sleep, I think about that first day in the coffee shop, the way Sarah smiled at me across the room, the hope and possibility that existed in that moment before I knew about her family, before the affairs and betrayals, before everything fell apart. And I wonder if there was a universe where things went differently, where she got help earlier, where her family wasn't toxic, where she could accept love without destroying it. But this isn't that universe. And in this one, Sarah is gone, and I'm left with the memories and the lessons and the determination to never again lose myself, trying to save someone who doesn't want to be saved. The saddest part is that Sarah's story isn't unique. There are so many people out there trapped in toxic family dynamics, believing that abuse is love, that pain is normal, that they don't deserve better, and they destroy themselves, and everyone who tries to help them, chasing approval that will never come, trying to earn love that should be freely given. And maybe that's why I'm sharing this story, not because I need sympathy or understanding, but because maybe someone out there will recognize themselves in Sarah's story, will see the pattern. Before it's too late, will choose themselves over their toxic family, will accept help when it's offered, will believe they deserve love without conditions. If you're reading this and you see yourself in Sarah, if you have family who makes you feel worthless, who takes and never gives, who makes you choose between them and everyone else who loves you, please know that it's not normal. It's not love. It's not your fault, and you deserve better. You deserve love that doesn't hurt, support that doesn't come with strings attached, family who celebrates your success instead of resenting it. And it's okay to choose yourself, to set boundaries, to walk away from people who hurt you, even if they're related to you by blood. And if you're like me, if you love someone who's trapped in a toxic family dynamic, please know that you can't save them, can't love them enough to make up for their family's cruelty, can't shield them from consequences forever. All you can do is offer support. Set your own boundaries and be prepared to walk away if they choose their dysfunction over health, because staying and enabling their patterns doesn't help them and destroys you. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is leave and hope that losing you will be the wake-up call they need, even if it comes too late. Sarah's death wasn't my fault. I know that now, knew it even then. Though the guilt still creeps in sometimes in quiet moments. Her choices were her own. Her pain was real, but her response to it was ultimately her responsibility, and I couldn't save her from herself. No matter how much I loved her, no matter how hard I tried, the only person who could save Sarah was Sarah, and she chose not to choose her family's familiar poison over the uncertain antidote of healthy love, and that choice killed her as surely as if they'd put the pills in her hand themselves. I don't know what happens to her family. Now, don't know if they feel any guilt or responsibility for their daughter's death. don't know if they've learned anything from this tragedy, or if they've just moved on to their next victim. Probably one of her brother's girlfriends or wives, someone new to drain and destroy, and I don't care because they're not my problem anymore. We're never supposed to be my problem, and the best thing I ever did was recognize that and walk away, even if I wish I'd done it sooner. This story doesn't have a happy ending, doesn't have a moral that makes the pain worthwhile, doesn't offer hope that love conquers all, because sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes dysfunction wins. Sometimes people choose death over healing. Sometimes all the love and support in the world isn't enough to save someone who's determined to destroy themselves. And that's a hard truth to accept, but an important one, because it frees us from the burden of trying to save everyone, from understanding that we can only control our own choices, our own boundaries, our own lives. I'm building a new life now, in a new city with new people who don't know this story, don't know about Sarah and her toxic family, and my failed attempt to save her. And that's okay, because this trauma doesn't define me, doesn't have to be the center of my story forever. I'm learning to love again differently this time, more carefully, but not cynically. Still believing in love, just understanding better what it can and can't do. Still wanting to help people, just recognizing the difference between supporting someone and enabling them. Still hoping for happy endings, just accepting that not everyone gets one. Sarah deserved better. Deserved parents who loved her unconditionally. Deserved to learn healthy boundaries as a child. Deserved friends who didn't betray her trust. Deserved a life free from manipulation and guilt and constant crisis. But deserving something and getting it are two different things, and all the deserving in the world couldn't save her from the choices she made, the patterns. She couldn't break the family. She couldn't leave. And that's the real tragedy. Not that she died, but that she lived so long in pain believing it was love. If you take anything from this story, please let it be this. You deserve love that doesn't hurt, support that doesn't come with conditions, family that builds you up instead of tearing you down, and if the people in your life can't give you that, it's okay to walk away, to choose yourself, to build a new family of friends and chosen loved ones who treat you with the respect and care you deserve, because staying with people who hurt you won't change them, won't earn their love, won't make you worthy in their eyes. It will only destroy you piece by piece until there's nothing left. And please, if you're struggling, if you're thinking about ending your life, please reach out for help. There are people who care, resources available. Hope even when you can't see it yourself. Sarah couldn't see. It couldn't believe it. But that doesn't mean it wasn't there. Doesn't mean it isn't there for you. So please choose life. Choose healing. Choose yourself. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Because you deserve the chance to build a better life. To find real love. To be happy. I'll carry Sarah with me always. Not the broken woman she became, but the brilliant, vibrant person she could have been, the woman I fell in love with in that coffee shop, who painted and laughed and dreamed of a better future. She's a reminder of what happens when we let toxic people convince us we're worthless, of the importance of boundaries and self-love, and walking away from people who hurt us, even when we love them, especially when we love them, because love shouldn't destroy us, shouldn't require us to sacrifice our souls, shouldn't come with a price tag of pain. Rest in peace, Sarah. I hope wherever you are, you've finally found the unconditional love and acceptance you spent your whole life searching for. I hope you're free from the voices that told you you weren't enough. I hope you know that you were loved, truly loved by people who wanted nothing from you but your happiness. And I hope that someday, I'll fully forgive myself for not being able to save you, for walking away, when staying would have destroyed us both, for surviving when you didn't. This is where the story ends, not with resolution or redemption or meaning wrestled from tragedy, but with the simple truth that sometimes people we love make choices that destroy them, and we can't stop them, can only save ourselves and hope that's enough, can only learn from their pain and try to do better, try to love better, try to be better, and maybe that's all any of us can do in the face of such senseless loss. Just keep living, keep loving, keep hoping that tomorrow will be better than today, even when today is almost too heavy to bear. Thank you for listening to my story, to Sarah's story. I know it wasn't easy to hear, wasn't the kind of tale that leaves you feeling uplifted or inspired, but sometimes we need to hear the difficult stories too. Need to be reminded that life is precious and fragile, and that the choices we make matter, that the people we surround ourselves with shape our destiny. that love alone isn't always enough, but that doesn't mean we should stop trying, stop caring, stop believing in the possibility of happiness even in the face of profound loss. Be kind to yourselves. Dear listeners, choose people who choose you. Love those who can receive your love, and never ever let anyone convince you that pain is the price of belonging, that suffering is the same as love that you have to earn, what should be freely given. You deserve better. We all deserve better, and it's never too late to choose a different path, to walk away from toxicity and toward healing, even when it feels impossible, especially when it feels impossible, because the alternative is a tragedy like Sarah's, and one is already too many. Remember her story, learn from it, but don't let it make you afraid to love, to trust, to believe in the goodness of people. Just be wise about who you give your heart to. Make sure they're capable of holding it gently, of treating it with the care it deserves. And if they're not, if they drop it or squeeze it too tight or demand you break it yourself to prove your love, then take it back, walk away, choose yourself. Because that's not love. That's not family. That's not worth your life. And you, my dear listener, you are worth so much more than that. So much more than you know, so much more than anyone who hurts you could ever understand. This is where I leave you with Sarah's story echoing in your mind, and mine a cautionary tale about the cost of toxic love, the price of enabling dysfunction, the tragedy of choosing familiar pain over unfamiliar healing. May you make better choices. May you demand better love. May you believe you deserve better, because you do. We all do. Even Sarah did. She just couldn't believe it, and that disbelief cost her everything. Don't let it cost you the same. The world needs you whole and healthy and free from the chains of toxic love. So break them, walk away, choose life, choose yourself, choose better, because Sarah couldn't, but you can. And that's the only redemption this story offers. The hope that someone somewhere will hear this and choose differently, will see themselves in Sarah's pain and say, no more enough. I deserve better and mean it and live it and thrive, despite everything. Because of everything, in defiance of everyone who said they couldn't. That's all any of us can do. Really learn from the tragedy's love, despite the risks. And never ever let anyone convince us that abuse is the price of belonging. Because it isn't. It never was, and it never will be. No matter what our toxic families tell us, no matter how much it hurts to walk away, no matter how lonely freedom feels. At first, it's worth it. You're worth it. And Sarah, wherever you are, I hope you finally know that too.